You know, some of the deadliest workplaces on Earth aren't what you'd expect. They can be right in front of us. Tanks, manholes, pipes. We call them confined spaces, and today we're going to break down the absolutely essential guide to working in them. This is the stuff that can literally mean the difference between life and death.
So take a look at this. At first glance, it's just a regular industrial tank. But what you might not realize is that stepping inside without the right prep can be a one-way trip. So what is it? What makes a seemingly ordinary space like this a potential death trap?
And look, this isn't some made-up training scenario. This really happened. A worker went into a tank where the oxygen level was only 8%. For perspective, we need about 21% to live. He collapsed almost instantly. Then, a coworker saw him and rushed in to save him, and he met the exact same fate.
And you know, the most heartbreaking part of this whole story? It was 100% preventable. This wasn't some freak accident. It was a catastrophic failure of a safety system that's designed specifically to stop things like this from happening.
When investigators looked into what went so wrong, they found 4 critical failures. Just a total breakdown. They didn't use a permit system, the employees had 0 training, nobody tested the air, and there was no rescue plan in place. Every single one of these was a direct violation of safety protocol.
So, to stop these tragedies, we first have to get really good at identifying the danger zones. OSHA has a specific name for them: Permit Required Confined Spaces, or PRCS for short. And figuring out if a space falls into this high-risk category is actually a really logical 2-part test. Okay, so here's how it works. Step 1. You ask, is it a confined space to begin with? That means it has to check 3 boxes. It's big enough to get into, it's tough to get in or out of, and it's not designed for someone to work in all day. If you can say yes to all 3, then you move to step 2. Does it have at least one serious hazard inside? If the answer is yes again, boom, it's a permit-required space. And believe me, these spaces are way more common than you might think. We're talking manholes, tanks, silos, vaults, pipelines. I mean, they're everywhere in our industrial landscape, which is exactly why understanding these rules is so absolutely vital.
All right, so what exactly are these serious hazards that kick a space into permit-required territory? Well, OSHA basically breaks them down into 4 main types. First up is the silent killer, atmospheric hazards. This is what caused the tragedy in our opening story, not enough oxygen. But you know, too much oxygen is also a huge danger because it creates a massive fire risk. Throw in flammable gases and toxic vapors, and you've got a recipe for absolute disaster. The second hazard is the actual physical shape of the space. Yeah, its internal configuration. Think about walls that slope inward or a floor that tapers down into a funnel. These designs can literally trap a worker, making what should be a simple exit an impossible escape in an emergency.
Third is the risk of engulfment, and this is just as terrifying as it sounds. It's the danger of being buried or swallowed up by a liquid or some kind of loose material, like grain in a silo or sand in a hopper. You can be completely overcome in just a matter of seconds.
And finally, number 4 is mechanical hazards. This is basically anything inside that space that moves. Agitators, grinders, conveyors. If someone accidentally turns one of those on while you're inside, it can lead to crushing injuries or even worse. So, with all these potential dangers, how do you manage an entry safely? Well, it's never a one-person job. It always requires a coordinated team of 3. Let's call it the safety trinity. So you've got the authorized entrant. That's the person actually doing the work inside. Then you have the attendant, who is their lifeline, watching from the outside. And finally, the entry supervisor, who has the ultimate authority to sign off on the permit and oversee the whole operation. This team is a chain, and it's only ever as strong as its weakest link. Now, this next point is absolutely critical. The attendant's single most important job is to stay outside, no matter what. They are the lookout, not the rescuer. Think back to that tragedy we discussed. The second person who died was a coworker who meant well, but he became an untrained rescuer. And get this, over 60% of all fatalities in confined spaces are would-be rescuers. It's a staggering statistic.
So this all leads us to the playbook, the step-by-step guide for turning what could be a high-risk entry into a completely controlled, safe operation. Following this playbook isn't a suggestion, it's non-negotiable, it's what saves lives.
Now, your most fundamental tool is going to be your atmospheric monitor. This is the device that sniffs the air for all those invisible hazards we talked about. But here's the catch. The tool is only as good as the person using it. Without proper training on how to use it and what the numbers actually mean, it's basically a paperweight.
And when it comes to testing, there is an unbreakable rule. You always test in this exact order. First for oxygen, second for flammable gases, and third for toxic gases. And there's a really good reason why. Many flammable gas sensors actually need a certain amount of oxygen to work right. If you test out of order, you could get a reading that looks safe when it's anything but.
Let's talk numbers. So normal air has about 21% oxygen. OSHA says the absolute minimum for safe entry is 19.5%. Anything lower, you're in the danger zone. Remember the worker from our story? He walked into an 8% oxygen environment. 8%.
But on the flip side of that, anything above 23.5% is also really dangerous. That's called oxygen enrichment. It dramatically increases the risk of fire and can make materials that wouldn't normally burn suddenly ignite, sometimes violently. All of these safety checks, all of this testing, it all culminates in one single, crucial document, the entry permit. Now please, don't think of this as just paperwork. It's the final official checklist. It's mission control confirming that every single precaution has been taken. Only when that's done does the supervisor sign off.
And that brings us to the final, critical piece, rescue. You absolutely must have a rescue plan and equipment, like this retrieval system you see here, ready to go before anyone enters. Hope is not a strategy here. In fact, OSHA requires rescue teams to practice their skills at least once a year.
You know, at the end of the day, confined space safety is really a shared responsibility. The employer has to provide the training, the gear, and the procedures. But it's up to every single team member, the entrant, the attendant, and the supervisor, to know their role inside and out and to follow that playbook without a single compromise.
Look, the system we've talked about works, but only when it's followed to the letter every single time. These procedures are the firewall between a routine workday and the kind of double fatality we saw at the beginning. So, it all comes down to one simple question. This playbook saves lives. Is your team following it?